Solar and Wind Energy Systems, ZTA 13-129. The purpose of the meeting is to hold a public hearing on the proposed zoning text amendment ZTA 13-129. This was previously heard and voted on earlier this year, but has been revised to incorporate a recent Senate bill which instructs a local jurisdiction to amend their code to permit these uses and structures on piers prior to approving individual projects. If you wish to comment on this item, you must sign in at the entrance of the meeting room. Please sign in now if you haven't done so. Prior to beginning the public hearing, Mr. Blass and Ms. Daly of the planning staff will provide an overview of the legislation.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Bunker and Planning Commission members. You summarized it quite well, sir, in that back on September 9th of this year, the Planning Commission did vote unanimously to recommend a previous version of ZTA 13-129 to the County Commissioners for their consideration. But in the interim period of time, since September, staff had incorporated Senate Bill 524 into this bill because it was fitting, since the legislation was also related to smaller energy systems. And Amy Daly is here as well to elaborate on any questions that you may have related to that new language, which you find in your copy of the ZTA. We specifically highlighted everything that is new language that you did not see back in September is all highlighted in yellow, and everything else is exactly the same way it was back when you voted unanimously to approve it back on September 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Blass. Good evening. I'm Amy Daly with the Planning and Growth Management Department. As Mr. Blass mentioned, the highlighted text is a result of Senate Bill 524, which was effective July 1st of 2013. It was a provision that's included in the Annotated Code of Maryland, and what you have before you is almost verbatim from what the state law provides. And it is a bill that allows for non-water dependent structures on piers, and that also includes solar, wind turbines, and geothermal units or small energy devices to be located on piers. The language is specific to the Chesapeake Bay critical area, so it's included as an amendment to Article 9 of the zoning ordinance. And while the primary reviewer for the criteria or limitations of the structures will be left to the Maryland Department of the Environment, Charles County still has a zoning authority on piers and structures on piers, and will be providing zoning permit authority. The sizes and height limitations are primarily going to be reviewed by the Maryland Department of the Environment. And the way that the Senate bill was provided to us, if we want to choose to have the residents of Charles County be able to have non-water dependent or small energy systems on piers, we have to actually amend our program to include these provisions. And what you have before you tonight in highlighted text is the result of that bill. And I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Any questions?
Several.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
The first is in Part 4, Roman numeral 4, page 9, C. Actually, it's all of 4. Closed loop geothermal. Am I correct in reading this that it does not permit open loop?
This is exactly as the Maryland Department of the Environment has in the annotated code. So it would only permit what's specified here, closed loop.
Okay. And not to criticize the folks who write legislation, but I'm trying to understand on page 8, and Bob and I are just looking at this, it says solar energy attached to a pier with the device associated with that system on the bottom part of page 8 of B. With that system does not extend more than 4 feet or 18 inches below, 4 feet above or 18 inches below the deck of a pier. I'm trying to understand what part of a solar system would be 18 inches below the deck of a pier.
Any part of the system that's necessary to continue the flow of energy.
Okay. I'm just trying to I'm trying to visualize these things to see how they're going to work. I mean, no one's going to put their solar panels under a pier. You've got the structure of the pier to hold it up. So that's sort of what this extraneous language is. And I'll let, and then some of these heights don't appear to make sense either. I'm maybe crossing Bob's question here. if I put a mast up, and I'm back on page 9, the height of the deck of the pier to the blade extended at its highest point is up to 12 feet. It says I can have a rotor diameter of 4 feet, which means the bottom of the rotor is 2 feet below 12 feet, so 10 feet above the deck.
Okay.
And that is the...
That'd be 8 feet.
8.
8 feet.
Be 8 feet.
8 feet.
And where's the maximum height here? I'm trying to figure out if we've got enough
That's it.
clearance.
12 foot is the maximum height. You can build up to 12 feet, so you could have one at 8 feet and 4 foot of rotor blades below that.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out, are we whacking people in the head with these rotor blades?
I can understand the nature of that question. We didn't actually come up with the criteria at the staff level. It was done at the Maryland Department of the Environment level, and I'm sure that they considered those factors. However, they haven't provided us with any significant guidance on that provision. But the Planning Commission and County Commissioners can choose to be more restrictive if they would like to.
You just might want to note that when you get around to permitting some of these, that you've got a couple of safety questions there that need to be thought through by the people who are putting up solar. Those are my questions.
Mr. Chair, I had two comments in reference to what Mr. Teager brought up on page 9, 8 at the top and 9 at the bottom. The biggest concern I have is from a public safety standpoint, and that seems to be a concern that I have tremendously in relationship to the height as well as the width of the turbines, because it could become a big issue.
Yeah. Particularly for the private, it could be a real liability issue for
That was
the
leading to
property
my
owner.
next statement. It could become a liability to the individual that owns the land and that pier is located on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, one question, I guess. First, has when did you include this amendment to the? Was it during the period in which the record was left open, or is this something?
No, this language, we determined to incorporate this language in the interim period of time
Right.
after the Planning Commission had voted
Right.
to send the last bill to the county commissioners.
Right.
In that interim period of time prior to us scheduling a date with the county commissioners, this legislation was made aware to us, and it made sense to incorporate it in this bill.
Yeah, okay.
And because of us incorporating this language into this bill, we wanted to bring the revised version back to the Planning Commission to let you have, obviously know that the version that you just sent to the commissioners had been revised, and to be able to provide us with any, input, comments, and concerns that you had about incorporating this into the existing legislation that we were proposing.
Well, then that gets to my second point that I think there is, since we've not had opportunity to actually express our either a recommendation on this particular amendment. I have some. We addressed the code issues as it pertains to the zoning text amendment. I mean, are we going to include that? Do we have that language inside the actual code for the permitting? Because you're talking about permits. So I guess my point is, you raised the question early on that if we want to have these devices on piers, is there some type of data or information that suggests that there's a clamoring or great demand for these on piers? Because I think some of these safety concerns, it doesn't seem to make much. There's some real issues here in terms of, propellers and, on piers. I mean, I've seen piers, and it's. I'm trying to visualize it myself, and I'm having difficulty trying to visualize it. So I guess that's really my question. I mean, what is the greater? Why the amendment? Why not just?
We have been approached by members of the public that have noticed that this legislation was passed.
Okay.
And they've also noted that in order for them to benefit or obtain any permits to do it, we would have to amend our code. So we have been approached by members of the public.
Okay. I guess that's a question, since we haven't had an opportunity to take a look at that. So, and we haven't received any comments at all on this language? Because I've never seen this legislation. I mean,
But Joe, that's the purpose of the meeting tonight.
No, I understand that, Mr. Chairman. My point is, we've not had an opportunity other than simply we just received this Now, the staff has determined to make an amendment to the legislation. The county commission is going to approve it without our. We're only recommending.
You haven't seen the legislation after
Yeah, in other words,
the county commissioners approved it, the
Yeah,
legislation we approved prior.
Yes, that's right. And so we're amending that legislation now, and there are some significant questions. I'd just like to know the genesis of including this as an amendment. I wasn't aware during our initial work session and vote that there was any particular clamor for these devices on piers. And I think some of the suggestions, sometimes I'm opposed to it, but I'm simply trying to determine as to whether or not these safety concerns can be addressed either in this legislation or, and I don't think it can because it's safe, but if you're amending it, we're going to follow the state. I mean, I'm just trying to understand what they're trying to do. Why not?
Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is required by the critical areas legislation.
It's not required. It's a choice that the jurisdiction can make if we choose to want to have our property owners be able to have these structures on piers. We have to amend our code to do so. And in putting the language into this bill, I was almost verbatim. I was not less restrictive, nor was I more restrictive than the state in copying. What you see here is what you would find in the annotated code 81804.
Right, I saw that. But do we have the option of actually changing some of those specifications?
To be more restrictive? Yes,
Okay,
sir.
I mean, that was I think that's the point of the other, Mr. Teager and Mr. Mitchell, that as it's currently written, it seems to be, raises a safety hazard. I mean, Mr. Bowling as well. So I'm not sure why we simply just cut and paste the state. Perhaps we should go back and return with something that might resemble a more safe approach.
I guess in answering that question, I would add that typically when we approve structures over the water, we are a zoning authority. We don't generally get into the specifics about how high the pier can be, how long the pier can be, how wide, what type of construction. We just generally permit the use, which is where I was going with the copying of the law from the state. Mm-hmm. Because they've said we have to amend our program, I chose that part of the program. But the actual specifics of any structure over tidal waters or state waters is generally reviewed and handled by the Maryland Department of the Environment. And this is what they have in the law, is what they're going to follow.
No, but you indicated that we could amend that. We can make it more restrictive. We could actually provide some safety measures, something. I just think it's awfully open-ended and doesn't seem to make much sense. I think with this the way the language is written, I mean, I'm only echoing, what I think a number of the members of the Planning Commission. So, I mean, you're bringing this to us now, and you're going to ask us whether we should, whether we would recommend the approval to the county commissioners. I think what we're suggesting is that we may need some modification to some language.
Well, Joe, I assume we'll leave the record open and we'll have a work session after this.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my point, Mr. Chairman. I think that perhaps we can leave the record open. I think we could recommend that. But also I think perhaps we should take a very close look at some modifying language that might address some of the concerns that have been expressed by the members of the commission this evening. I mean, I guess that's my point. I'm not. It just doesn't seem to. It raises some serious issues, I think, the way it's currently drafted.
Can we just say that we're not approving this particular article at this time until there are further considerations by the county?
Bob, my recommendation would be to leave the record open, and then we'll have a work session, after the record closes. I think the county staff has heard our concerns, and hopefully when they come back, they may have some suggestions for how to amend the language.
Well, are we going to have a work session on that, or is the county going to have it, or how?
The Planning Commission is going to have a work session after the public record closes.
Okay.
We're supposed to we're having a public hearing. We'll leave the record open, hopefully, and then in a month or so we'll have a work session.
Well, I agree, Mr. Chairman. I think
because there's other stuff. There is electrical code involved in this thing. You're going to have the code people in here to see what can and cannot be done if you're going to do this stuff on the piers. So I have no problem with leaving it open, but I don't want this going any further than where it is here now because it's strictly an unsafe practice, and I'm surprised the state would even recommend something like this. But maybe they've never been on a pier before. I don't know.
I think they have, John. Joe, go ahead.
Since the state under 5A has said the height from the deck of the pier to the blade extended at its highest point is up to 12 feet, the county could insert language saying that the vertical blade clearance of the deck shall not be less than 8 feet.
But it doesn't.
That means that every one of these that has a rotor diameter of 4 feet has to be 12 feet high, which would give you 8 feet above the deck.
Which is not high enough for kids running out there fishing off piers, anything else that goes with it. It's just a totally unsafe law. Anybody that lives on the water knows what goes on the water, and this is just something to cause a big problem. It can be fixed. Maybe put a complete cover over the blade or something like that. And then, there's a multitude of things that can be done, but this, as it's written, should never, never, never pass anything.
I think our council wants to weigh in.
It sounds like there are some significant concerns which may have to do also with being able to really visualize what is being proposed. So I would just recommend that staff also bring a couple of examples, because that may help craft some language when we come back to the work session.
Amy, I hate to beat you up, but I have a question too.
Sure.
Page 9, Section 3. It says that a solar system shall not extend above the height of the boathouse roof. But even if you have a half-inch solar panel, it's going to, literally it's going to extend. If you take this literally, it's going to extend above the height of the roof. And most of those solar panels are on some sort of stand, so they're probably going to be 6 inches to a foot above the height of the roof. Are you talking about the peak of the roof, or are you talking about the roof itself? It's not clear.
That was my understanding, that it would have been the highest point.
The highest point of the roof.
Which would be the peak, yeah.
Okay. Just one more thing. There's two misspellings on page 8. Line 30 and, line 29 and 30.
Okay.
Typo.
Typos.
Yeah, there's another one. I was going to mention the same thing. 20 for installation.
Yes.
And on page 10, line 2, extended. There may be others.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the zoning text amendment? Ken?
I just have a thought-provoking comment.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just a thought-provoking comment. We're talking about two different types of solar energy, right? We're talking about wind, and we're talking about sun. And it seems like there would be different rules and regulations for each, because they're different. Whatever the guidelines are for wind would not be the same as for the sun. So I've never seen a solar, well, not a solar, but a wind solar system up close. All of the ones I've seen, internet snapshots, I've seen them on television, and all of those fields, those wind solar fields, have been far away from the human population, and so I don't know why we're talking about putting them on piers where there will be human population, right? So, it's just something to think about. Solar, a sun solar is totally different. If we drive down Route 5, I think, we see the Smecco solar system. That field is just a bed. So there doesn't appear to be any apparent danger there, right? But now you're mounting poles and you're mounting wind turbines, which are potentially dangerous. So I don't think that you want to integrate the human population with turbines, solar fields. That's just something to think about.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd just like to point out that large sailboats have both small wind turbines and solar panels on them. Go into the marinas and look around. You'll see a goodly number of the sailboats, particularly the ocean-going guys, with solar panels and small turbines mounted on their boats. A lot of people are using solar panels on their boats, even their power boats, to keep their batteries trickle charged.
John?
Just Amy, on page 7, more misspellings that need to be corrected. On line 12, does not include it. Take the D off of included. So it would be does not include.
Okay, thank you.
And then go down to line 30. Institutionally is misspelled. And I'm not sure about industrially, whether there's one too many L's. And another question I had of the two of you, if you could possibly bring, the next time we have a discussion of this, any sample of a place that might already have this so that we can see what aesthetically it looks like if you have this in a neighborhood on piers. I mean, what does it do to the seascape, more or less?
I don't necessarily know if anyone has already started to build, because the fact that everyone has to amend their program to use this bill, but I do know that other counties are watching how it plays out here in terms of modeling their own language. But I'm not necessarily certain that there are any examples built yet.
Okay.
Also, I read that they were using a figure of approximately, if they're going to put it on the land, the turbine on the land, they'd have to go at least 18 feet from the bulkhead or from the water itself. Is that correct? Is that what you read out of this? It'd be 1.5 times the height. So that would have to be a setback of 18 feet from the front property line or bulkhead or whatever it may be from the water. And I think the basic reason is, again, a safety reason there, because if that turbine was sitting on the edge of the water and if they went overboard, it might cause a little bit of problems to somebody or something of that nature. Especially electricity going into water is not a good thing to be around. I kind of speak a little from experience on that. So the whole thing just needs some more thought to it. And I would be willing, and I'm sure other people here would be willing, after the meeting that we have, the open meeting, that we could sit down together and kind of talk about this, because I don't want to be a part of something that's going to be unsafe. I'm sorry. I just don't want to be a commission recommending anything that is unsafe.
Okay, thank you.
Ken?
Have we done any research in other parts of the country to see if anyone else is doing this?
No, I have not.
Are we going to?
If you would like me to, yes.
Oh, well, if someone else is doing this already, it just might be a good idea just to.
I just know that the state of Maryland is offering it, and they will, if the local jurisdiction amends their program to do it, the state of Maryland will already approve structures with these criteria. And I can see what information they had as a basis to why they chose this language. Maybe there are national examples.
Are there any other questions or comments about the zoning text amendment? No one has, do you have a question, Joe? You good? No one has signed up to testify, so is there a motion to leave the record open?
Chairman, I'll move that the Planning Commission leave the public record open for 45 days. I mentioned 45, I think, because of the holiday season. That's about 2 weeks. So I would recommend that we leave it open for about 45 days.
Second.
Jones seconded. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. The record's open for